Raw had its 2024 draft on Monday night. And we're going to look at some of the picks, and we're going to look at really what happened and did it make sense. And, you know, we coming off the SmackDown night one of the draft, where we talked a little bit about how some of those picks just weren't at the top of my list, frankly. I'm sorry if I don't get excited about Akira Tozawa and, you know, Alpha Academy as a top, 5 draft pick for my brand. But ultimately, does Raw correct it? Does it correct some of the criticism that we talk about as far as getting to have actual changes made instead of what SmackDown just seemed to run around that theme of retaining the roster? I'm your host, Bryan. Hi, Ballard. We're going to do a real quick Raw review of the picks that went down between the two brands. Let's get in. So first, we had the first round of the draft. I'm going to remind you guys, there will end up being 6 rounds this time, 24 picks total, but we'll get done with them pretty quickly for you. Champions are not eligible. Same rules basically as last Friday. And here's our pool that we look at for tonight. A little bit bigger because Raw has 3 hours worth. Hopefully when this deal goes to Netflix, we can get Raw chiseled down with no commercials. But ultimately, we do have the first round. Stephanie McMahon makes her entrance for the pick. And Raw gets the first pick in this night. And her first pick overall is going to be a faction of sorts, Imperium. But only 2 members. And I'm actually okay with this pick being the number 1 pick. Gunther is the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion at 666 days. Still weird to say. But Gunther also declared himself as the 2024 King of the Ring tournament, which my prediction can come true of Gunther winning it all. I prefer it be Money in the Bank, but King of the Ring might work too. Ludwig Kaiser is a 2-time NXT champion. So overall, we did have a recent breakup of Imperium, but I do believe retaining Imperium on Raw was the right move. Gunther has too much unfinished business, and I see Gunther as a world champion in the future. We also have our first pick for SmackDown, and that is Jade Cargill. Jade Cargill is a once-in-a-lifetime generational talent, according to WWE. She made her debut at the 2024 Royal Rumble, which I was excited to see. She's a former NCAA Division I basketball star. Let me give you the stat that WWE does not want to give you when it comes to Jade Cargill. She is an AEW former wrestler that they built up to hand over to the WWE. She had a 61-0 match streak that went undefeated until she ultimately left the company. So basically what we see here is she got the Bill Goldberg treatment in AEW, got built up in the mid-card title with the TBS Championship, and then got handed over to Raw, really. SmackDown in this case, but handed over to the WWE. But ultimately, I would say, yeah, it's a good solid first pick. One thing I noticed in this draft, SmackDown cares about the women's division, and if you notice other picks, they went very female heavy, building up that brand around Bayley. So I do think retaining Jade Cargill, since it was made to be such a big deal that they got her free agent signing, I feel it is smart to value that signing and retain her. Next, we've got the whole faction. All members of Damage Control going to Raw. Io Sky, former WWE Women's Champion. Dakota Kai, 2-time NXT Tag Team Champion. We got the Kabuki Warriors, the current 2-time WWE Women's Tag Team Champions. So, ultimately here, I think we get the whole faction. Raw went for a numbers and good pick because we had to counterbalance all the women making the move over to SmackDown from Raw and getting drafted and retained. So, this is going to help build up the Raw Women's title, which is in a little flux right now with Rhea Ripley being out, and they just had a battle royal to declare a new champion with Becky Lynch. So any of these girls could step right in and be challengers at this point. So I think it is good to refresh the brand, and I think Damage Control's storyline is done. So let's get them away from each other. Keeping Bayley on SmackDown, of course. Speaking of SmackDown, we got our next pick for them in our final pick of the first round of Raw. It's the Grand Slam champion himself, former Universal Champion, and a back-to-back Saturday night main eventer of WrestleMania, Kevin Owens. I'll give you a stat the WWE doesn't want you to remember about Kevin Owens. He's Chris Jericho's former best friend. Nah, we'd rather focus on the friendship with Sammy. That's cool. But that was a great storyline back in its day with the Festival of Friendship. And Kevin Owens is able to fit on any brand at any time. So why not keep the KO on the SmackDown? We get into the second round of this draft for Raw, and out comes Logan Paul to make the pick. He also had another internet sensation with him, but I'm not even going to put him on the picture here. We're just going to put a Prime Energy blue raspberry bottle there, because why? Sponsorship. Not by me, but, by Logan Paul. So, ultimately, Paul's going to make his first pick for the brand, and the first pick is going to be CM Punk. They got him his return to WWE after a 10-year absence at Survivor Series. We've got a recovering from a torn tricep injury. I don't know if that's something that, I guess that's good for the mass audience to know, but I don't know if we want to market that as a good thing. He's injured his tricep about 3-4 times now. Grand Slam champion as well. I do feel like it's smart of Raw to retain CM Punk. CM Punk is going to be having a major feud with Drew McIntyre, and ultimately, he's going to be great for that brand and face recognition going into the Netflix deal next year. So, I do think there's a lot of unfinished business, and CM Punk is the right man for the job to stay on Raw. Next up, we've got The Pride, Bobby Lashley, two-time WWE champion, and the Street Profits, the Triple Crown winners, going over to SmackDown, or staying on SmackDown. Fair enough. I feel like they still got a lot of work to do over there, and you can always use somebody like this, Bobby Lashley, a main eventer also in that sense. Not bad to maybe have Cody take on this faction in the future. Next up, we've got the return of the monster among men, Braun Strowman, 6 foot 8 inches and 385 pounds, 4-time champion, 2018 Money in the Bank winner. And, I find it very interesting that we're getting closer and closer to the Wyatt 6. We get the longest video tonight on Raw with the QR code. I'll link that right here. But ultimately, I find it interesting that the Black Sheep himself returns on the same night, that we get a little bit deeper into the Wyatt 6 Uncle Howdy business. So we also have our next draft pick for SmackDown, and that is Tiffy Time, former NXT champion with the prettiest moonsault ever, the signature move of her, and she'll compete at Backlash for the Women's Championship. Ultimately, that tells us Tiffany Stratton will be on SmackDown for a while. I think it's good for her to be there, compete in that women's division, but not hold the pressure of holding up the main event all by herself. So I think it's good to let her marinate in the next year on that division as we move forward. Speaking of moving forward, we're going to get into round 3. Damn! We got the Acolytes, the APA, whatever you want to call them, Bradshaw and Farouk. Ultimately, we're going to get into their draft picks. And the first pick for Raw is getting the LWO over to Raw. Very, very smart selection. We got with that Rey Mysterio, Cruz del Toro, Joaquin Wilde, Zelina Vega, Dragon Lee, and Carlito, which is interesting because we then are given footage of SmackDown and Carlito being the one to attack Dragon Lee. Ultimately, Rey Mysterio is a Grand Slam champion himself and a WWE Hall of Famer. Dragon Lee, they just got as the future of Lucha Libre. Del Toro and Wilde are aerial artists, according to the description. And then Zelina Vega, the Queen of the Ring of 2021. That's great for marketing for this upcoming Queen of the Ring tournament. And Carlito again revealed. So, what we got here really is getting the LWO away from Legado Fantasma. So ultimately, we've got the LWO and Rey Mysterio getting back over towards Raw with Dominic and maybe turning that feud back up again for a final retirement tour overall. Next, to balance that, SmackDown goes ahead and takes Legado del Fantasma. Santos Escobar, Angel, Berto, and Elektra Lopez. Santos is the leader of Legado. Angel and Berto are high-flying artists. And, here's a stat that WWE doesn't want you to remember for some reason. Santos Escobar was a former Cruiserweight champion in NXT. So, I think it's a great move. I think it's a good way to balance. SmackDown maybe seeing that, we need to balance out having something equal to Raw, so there you go. Next up, speaking of Raw, we've got the 3-time world champion getting drafted, the 2020 Rumble winner, And newly declared for the King of the Ring tournament as well, Drew McIntyre. McIntyre joining the red brand, or staying on the red brand, because he's got a lot of unfinished business with the World Championship and CM Punk and so forth. So, great choice here by Raw. It's a solid pick. We did get a little promo later that he's mad that CM Punk was picked before him. I think it's a fair argument. Punk's injured for who knows how long, and McIntyre's been pretty healthy overall. So we've then got SmackDown's pick, and it's the King of Strong Style, the two-time Intercontinental Champion, United States Champion, and NXT Champion Shinsuke Nakamura. His signature move they got is the Kinshasa. So ultimately, we've got Nakamura going to SmackDown. I'm not going to hate on the pick. I actually kind of see Nakamura more or less going back to NXT, maybe to help freshen up the brand down there while they drafted up some new people. But again, Nakamura, worthy pick. Hopefully SmackDown can revitalize him a little bit even more. And speaking of it, we're going to bring into the fourth round Teddy Long and Lunder Blaze doing the honors for this one. And we got the first pick, which is Raw retaining, as I mentioned, Dominic Mysterio, Finn Balor, and JD McDonough. They very clearly took Judgment Day, but they noticed it didn't include Damian Priest or Rhea Ripley. Priest, I understand, he's the world champion, cannot be drafted, but Rhea Ripley, that's interesting. What are they doing with that? Why wasn't she included as part of the group? I wonder. 9 championships between these three, though, and they run the show on Monday night, so we're going to get a little bit of maybe a Rey Mysterio mix in here with some faction warfare. So ultimately, then SmackDown goes female heavy again, and they grab Naomi. So unparalleled athleticism, 2-time women's champion, and a former tag team women's champion. Naomi's going to stay on SmackDown. I think it's great. That's where all the women are going to compete. And I think the SmackDown roster is looking a lot stronger for the females right now. Raw makes a splash, stealing a top talent from NXT. Former NXT champion, the Invincible, Ilya Dragunov. His signature moves are the H-Bomb and the Torpedo Missile. You guys notice that they're just signature moves now. They're not necessarily finishers. That's interesting. Next up interesting, we've got a former women's tag team champions, Piper Niven and Chelsea Green. Unlimited potential for success, but conflicts with management have been an issue as noted. These two are making their way to SmackDown to a very robust women's division. Up next then we have finally the WWE Round 5 that occurred with the Dudley Boys making another pick. We've got the New Day with the most decorated tag team in WWE history with 12 championship reigns. We've got Kofi Kingston winning at WrestleMania 35, the WWE Championship, and Xavier Woods with the King of the Ring 2021. Nice to have a solid tag team on Raw, and I feel like SmackDown just counters that next with the 2-time NXT UK champions and the NXT Tag Champions. We've got Pretty Deadly up next, staying on SmackDown. But going back to Raw from Dublin, Ireland, we've got her signature move. There it is again, not finish, her signature move, Nightwish. And she defeated Becky Lynch for the Women's Championship. Interesting note here, they had to kind of give us a little bit about who Lyra Valkyria is. Interesting with the Crow, vibe to her. Interesting, there's a Crow movie coming out this summer, so maybe there's a chance for cross promotion, who knows. Ultimately, we then go into another pair of women drafted as a tag team, and that is the former NXT Women's Championship for Indy and the tag team themselves with Candice LeRae. So will this recent attitude create a little bit of a spark? But again, more ladies on SmackDown. Next up, we have the round 6 very quickly at the end of the night between the general managers making their picks. And we have what is going to be Karrion Kross, the 2-time NXT champion, and the Authors of Pain, along with Paul Ellering and Scarlett as the X Factor of the group. And so ultimately, we do have this group staying and coming over to Raw just to add a little into the mix. In order to counter that, why not a couple other NXT legends, former tag team champions, and both former NXT world champions, Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. Team DIY. Interesting to see if they keep them in the tag division for a while, or ultimately will these guys be competing at a higher level in the blue brand. Then Raw counters with the 6', 300-pound WWE speed competitor. I'll throw that in there. His signature move, the Tsunami. We got the basically Bronson Reed going in to staying with Raw, and the former NXT North champion. They want you to be aware of that as well. So big Bronson Reed staying on Raw. And then finally we get Blair Davenport going to SmackDown as the, in the NFL it's called Mr. Irrelevant. So maybe this is Miss Irrelevant, getting drafted at the very last pick of the draft. She was born in England, raised in New Zealand. They describe her as a gothic charisma with a cold, hard fury. What marketing major wrote that up? And then we have the frightening intensity taglined into it. So Blair Davenport is going to come from NXT, getting her chance to be on the blue brand with all the other ladies. Hopefully she doesn't get lost in the shuffle over there. Well, guys, that's going to be my overall final thoughts. So it's interesting to note that we have a lot of shuffling here, more on Raw, but I feel like overall in the draft, we had some shuffling, some drafts from SmackDown, probably the correct drafts from NXT as well coming up. But ultimately, some people, I think they said that NXT got plucked dry, and I really don't think that's the case. We still got Trick Williams. We still got a lot of people to build up down there, Oba Femi, etc. There's a lot more, and NXT always knows how to build their brand up more and more. So, and let's be honest about it, the people that watch it are going to watch it. So, we ultimately do have the brand shuffling a little, but remember, all brands are final, so I guess you can do trades this week all the way till May 6th. So keep that in mind, and maybe the general managers want to work together in some finalizations of these rosters. Well, guys, those are my final results and thoughts of Raw. Thanks for watching as always, and remember, it's not goodbye. Like, share, subscribe. It's just game over.